I'm Sarah Turner. I'm a freelance medical copywriter and copywriting mentor, and I'm going to share with you today a little bit of a story about my transition from event planning to copywriting. So if you aren't familiar already with a little bit of my story as an entrepreneur, my very first entrepreneurial venture was actually event planning. It was Events by Sarah Ashley, and it was event planning business. It was a lot of fun, an incredible amount of work. But ultimately, I decided to shut it down and pursue copywriting. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about why. So first things first, I decided to do event planning because I had experience in, designing florals a little bit and also in hosting events and helping friends host events. So I was like, maybe I can do this. So the first reason I chose it when I first decided to leave my 9-to-5 was because it was something that I was like, might be able to do this. I'm pretty sure I can do this and figure this out. I'm a very organized person. I also really enjoy talking and engaging with a lot of different kinds of people, although it also made me very, very nervous. So I learned some really big lessons from event planning. First things first is that I learned that it's not as hard to start a business as you might think. Setting up an LLC and everything like that, everything you need to really get going is not as hard as you might think it is. It really involves mostly going to your Secretary of State website, setting up your LLC, doing a little bit of research online on how to set up your first small business. So when I learned that it was much more accessible to start a business than I had ever imagined, I was like, wow, okay, maybe I can do this. The other thing that I learned is that I could pretty quickly grow a name for myself in an area and in an industry. I was very surprised that within 3 years, I was already doing pretty huge events, being featured in some pretty incredible publications, and it really just all kind of surprised me because, here I am, a very newbie entrepreneur, and I'm like, who are these people entrusting me with all these giant events, right? So it was very shocking. The things that I didn't love is that event planning is a lot of hard work. You have to be super organized and you have to grow and build relationships with vendors. And the people I was working with, i.e. my clients, tended to not really respect the amount of work it took. They thought it was easy. They thought they could do it themselves. And so they were a little resentful of having to pay to hire an event planner because they felt like they could have done it themselves. And so I very quickly picked up on that and noticed that it didn't feel great to be treated like that. Now, I do believe if I had gone back and I had all the information and knowledge I have now, I would have told my younger self to only work with clients who valued what I did. And that would have changed a lot of who I said yes to, because I definitely said yes to some people that were honestly not worth my while, not worth the money. I would have been much better to say no to the project altogether and kept my sanity, quite frankly. So that was another thing. The other thing that was really problematic for me specifically is that you were stuck in the location, right? So events happen in a space. And what that means is you have to be in that space to look over the different venues and talk to the vendors. And then you are committed almost a year out to an event because that's when people start planning events. It's usually about a year out. And so you're stuck in that place planning it. Obviously, you can leave or whatever and go on vacation. But I was like, I really want a career that is completely remote, completely location independent. That's where that emphasis on finding something like that came from, because I was felt very stuck in the place that I was in. So I started looking for location independent work, and I actually started writing while I was an event planner. I started doing some content writing, and I was like, ooh, I really like this. But I had always learned that you couldn't earn great money or even decent money as a writer, right? We all have the idea of a starving artist, a starving writer. And I also didn't realize that you could write outside of writing novels, right? So I only thought that you could write books. I had a very, very small understanding of what the possibilities were. And I think that's really common because we don't often talk about all the different career options available to us, right? We grow up thinking it's like you can be a policeman, a firefighter, a doctor, a lawyer. At least that's what I grew up learning. Anyway, so I eventually was like, okay, I want to shut down this event planning business, which the other thing is once I decided I wanted to shut it down, I had a year's worth of work to go through. And I was like, I don't want that anymore. Smaller projects on a smaller time frame, location independent work, but I did learn that whatever I decided I wanted to do, I could start my own business. Big win, huge win, really. So I decided to look for something that was location independent. I could earn decent money. Those are my two main criteria. And I started searching. And this is something that I always tell my students, like, be a forever student, be a seeker. Look at the stories that are available to you online of people who are choosing different paths, choosing paths outside the traditional 9-to-5, not looking for jobs within companies, but actually paving their own ways. And so through Google searches, YouTube searches, I started learning about the world of online marketing. I initially was very, very resistant because I didn't ever want to be involved in marketing. I thought of it as very sleazy, very slimy, car salesman-y. That was my only idea of marketing, because those examples, which definitely exist online, are the most eye-catching, the most emotion-evoking, because usually you see them and you're like, ugh, right? So I didn't think I wanted to do anything with marketing, but I was very fascinated by the idea of writing online. So getting into content writing seems like the safer bet, because then I wouldn't have to sell myself, right? So that was kind of my thinking for getting into writing and looking into kind of content writing. So I'm writing on the side, I'm writing for some content mills, I'm making peanuts, and I'm really resisting the idea of actually researching and digging into copywriting, even though I'm aware of it. As I'm going through this process, I'm realizing that the writing I'm doing is actually copywriting, except for I'm not actually engaging and learning actively about copywriting and really improving my skill set as a copywriter. So I'm kind of doing this wishy-washy in between copywriting and content writing. And finally, I accidentally get CC'd on a email to a client from the content mill I'm writing for, and I'm making $30 on a 1,000-word blog, and they're charging $300. And I was just like, wait a minute, what? And so I kind of decided that I needed to examine my self-limiting beliefs around marketing, around earning money online, around what it might look like to not have to use a content mill to create a business so that I could have my own clients, choose who I get to work for. Because that was the other thing. When you write for a content mill or a marketing agency, you are told what clients to write for. You don't get to choose who you're writing for. And for me, that wasn't as rewarding as kind of going after people that I saw online were doing great things that I was really excited about, and I wanted to support and amplify their voice. So as I'm kind of going through this shift of like, all right, I want to have my own clients, I'm seeing that that is really important and valuable. I also want to be able to say who I want to work for, which means I'm probably not going to go after the people, go after a profitable niche, but rather go after things that are in alignment with my values so that I'm really excited to get up and write during the day. In fact, there was one story where as I started to go after my own clients, I ended up with this one doctor because I did want to work in the health and wellness space, but he was having me write about ultra low fat diets. So like 0 fat diets for weight loss, which we actually know isn't necessarily the best thing, especially for women. It kind of messes with hormone production. It's not really great for brain health actually to have a 0 fat diet. And so as I was writing some of the pieces for him, his website and stuff, I was just constantly like overwhelmed with dread, and writing for him was extremely difficult. And so I decided to take a step back. I was like, what is happening here? I need the money, but it's like impossible for me to get me to write for this person. And actually, ultra low fat diets kind of had a negative impact on my little sister's health. And that's one of the reasons I had like kind of done my own research. I mean, if you know anything about the keto diet, you know that you can still lose weight and not have a completely 0 fat diet. So anyway, all of this I was realizing was pushing against my values in a negative way, and exactly the thing that was holding me back and preventing me from wanting to get into marketing in the first place was doing something that was out of alignment with my values. So it was a very big aha moment. I was like, you know what? Yes, getting my own clients is wonderful, but one of the main benefits of that is that I don't have to write for people I don't believe in. And so I actually had to go to that client, and it was actually so scary and very nerve-wracking, and say, hey, you know what? I've been working on this project for you, and I've actually been really struggling, and I'm realizing that it's not quite in alignment with my values. I didn't go too much into it because it's not really any of their business. And so I'm realizing that we're not a good fit, and I'm going to refund you your money and put you maybe in touch with some job boards or something like that so that you can find a copywriter who is interested in writing for you. I didn't want to harshly judge him. So I wanted to give him a solution, but I definitely didn't want to do it myself. And let me tell you, that was one of the biggest lessons for me in becoming a copywriter and a business owner as a copywriter, is because it released a ton of energy for me. So what I mean by that is, when you are doing energy draining tasks, it makes everything else so much more difficult, in my experience, right? It makes getting up more difficult. It makes getting excited to work on client work really difficult and extremely draining. And that's how I came to learn that your energy is a much more dynamic resource than we've ever really been led to believe, right? Your time is finite, but your energy is actually incredibly dynamic, and you can play with it. So if you are doing more energy expansive things and energizing things, you're going to feel like you have more energy. And we've probably all experienced this, right? When you're doing really high energy and energy creating things, you can tend to get into a state of flow where you can work for hours on end and it doesn't feel like work. But if you're doing something that's super draining, maybe because it's not in alignment with your values, it takes forever to just do one small task. Now, it's not always because it's not in alignment with your values. Sometimes it's because it's pushing up against some resistance, maybe fear, maybe it's a new task, and you're scared to get started. So definitely want to push back on those things when they happen, but knowing between the two is a game changer, seriously. So as I'm kind of digging in and figuring out what do I want out of my life, and I'm kind of transitioning from event planning to copywriting, another thing I took with me is that I really wanted to work with clients that had respect for me and the work that I do. And let me tell you something, that really helped with my overall sense of self-worth and pride. Because when I used to tell people that I was an event planner, I actually was a little embarrassed to tell people that's what I did for work. And what I realized was it wasn't necessarily what I was actually doing for work, it was how I was going about it. And so as I took that lesson with me into copywriting, I decided to really, really say no early and often to clients that made me feel like shit, people who were condescending. I just don't have time for that anymore. It's not necessary. There's lots of wonderful people to work with in this world. And if somebody has that old school mindset of trying to motivate you to work harder for them with fear or by being condescending to you, it's just not the only way to do business. And in my opinion, it's an old school mindset that really needs to be shed. So you don't have to do that as a copywriter, or quite frankly, as any business owner. And I want to encourage you, if that's playing a role in your life right now in any way, to just say no, release that energy and find something that works for you. The other reason that I love copywriting is because I really get to amplify voices I think are important and need help getting out in front of the right people. I also think of copywriting as kind of like matchmaking, because when it's done well, you're not selling to everyone, you're selling to the person you're really truly going to help with your product or service. So it's a really rewarding career choice. It's highly lucrative. You can make at the peak amount, because right now I only do copywriting part-time, but when I was just copywriting full-time, I was at my peak earning around $25,000 a month. So it's a lot of money, right? You can earn great money. You can be a voice for people who you think are doing good in the world, and you can do it from anywhere, which has served me tremendously. It's helped me be home for my family when they've needed me, and it's also allowed me to go on trips. I just got back from a 7-week trip where I wasn't on vacation. It's very confusing for a lot of people, but I was actually working and traveling at the same time. So it's incredibly rewarding. That's just a little bit around my story, how I got to where I got to, and why why I chose copywriting. So if you're interested in looking into copywriting, officialsarahturner.com is my website. Feel free to check it out. I've got so many resources for you. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you have any questions at all, please leave them for me in the comments. I love reading them. And I'm grateful for you. Thanks for being here.